Hello, welcome back. Welcome back. Obviously, there's lots of people who are like have a lot to confess in our church because you're just still going, confessing your deepest, darkest sins, breaking all the rules. Those people that are still talking are clearly those people. I'm joking. That's not what we're like. So hello, my name is John. If I haven't met you, do come say hello. I am the Kids and Families Pastor here at St Wins, and I am married. I'm so blessed to be married to the wonderful Stacey, who's not here. She's off at my sister's with our three lovely kids, Tallulah, Joe, and Isaac. And I've got a bit of a question for you. I wonder, who is the higher human authority in your life? Who is it that you quote? I'm talking about the person whose name you drop to get something done. So if you're at a wedding, you can achieve almost anything by saying it's for the bride. Need to push into the queue? It's for the bride. Need to take an extra cake? It's for the bride. It's all okay, isn't it? At university, when you're writing essays, you can't just say things. You always have to say, who said it first? Whose authority are you standing on? It is really annoying when you write essays, you just want to say something and you've got to look up a random quote and find normally it's some old dude that said it previously, to then just say, well, they said this before. And you have to write down exactly where you said it. In our church, obviously the highest authority is Ali, and we might say something like, oh, Ali asked me just to pick this up, or Ali asked me to rearrange this, or, she's laughing over there. Or we might say, oh, the Bishop Debbie, she's asked us to come here and plant. That's what we would say as a church. And in my household, and I think in most households, it's one of the parents. In mine, it is definitely my wonderful wife, Stacey. And my kids, you'll always hear them say, Mummy says I can do this. Mummy says it's okay. Mummy lets me do it. And it's not just to me, it'll be to grandparents, babysitters. I wonder in your household, is there a bit like that? The person that gets quoted, this person let me do it, it's okay. In the passage we're going to read today, Jesus does the complete opposite of that. Jesus, he starts with an authority, a real statement of authority, and then changes it and puts his own ideas. So he stands there at the beginning and he says, you've heard it said, do not murder. Now he says you've heard it said, but this is the commandment that was given. It's one of the 10 commandments that God himself had written on stone tablets. So it's quite an authoritative statement if God's written something in stone. And also, I don't think there's anyone here that disagrees with do not murder. That's like, we're kind of all happy with that. Not many cultures are going around saying, do you know what, I'm pro-murder. But Jesus goes on to say something different. He adds a bit to that statement. God says this, but I say this. I'm going to invite Dan to come up and read today's passage for us, which is Matthew 5, 21 to 30. And it'll come up on the screen as well.
Thank you. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you've paid the last penny. You've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell.
Thanks, Dan. So as a church, we are looking at the Sermon on the Mount. This is Jesus' teaching as he's addressing the crowds, explaining his message and going into depth about it. And Ali spoke the last 2 weeks about this. She's given me a really fun passage about cutting off limbs and so on and, going into hell. But actually, there is such joy and such amazing stuff in this passage. If you want to hear Ali's talks, they're up on YouTube. It's really good to check them out in the week if you miss them on a Sunday. And today I'm looking at this passage, the next bit, where Jesus says, you've heard it said this, but I say this, I tell you this. So in this reading, Jesus stands in his own authority. And this would have been completely different to how other rabbis, other teachers of the time would have done it. They would have said, well, I'm this guy and I'm basing my teaching on this guy and he's basing it on that guy. And look, this is what it says in the text that was given to us. And that's how they would have done it. Just like at university today, when you make a statement, you have to reference it in painful detail with the exact book you got that one-line quote from. So Jesus does the opposite. Why does he do that here? Elsewhere in the Bible, you see Jesus regularly quoting the scriptures to a range of people. When he's tempted by the devil, it's the Bible he goes to bat him away, to refuse the devil. When he speaks to people that like him and people that really don't like him, he's constantly throwing in these lines of scriptures that they and he knew so well. But here he does the opposite. And it's not because he wants to get rid of it. Just before, in this passage, he says, I don't want to get rid of it. In one translation, it translates Jesus' words that he has come to give full meaning to the law and the prophets. That's the bit that we would call the Old Testament nowadays. So the Jewish people had this set of rules that they were encouraged to rigidly stick to at the time. But sadly, so many of the Jewish people and the Jewish leaders had lost sight of what really mattered. Their eyes were fixed so tightly on the rules, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not do this, that they'd completely miss the point. Jesus is wanting to do something different. He sees the limitations of this rule-based culture and how poorly it's being applied. And he wants to do something different. And in the Gospel of Mark, he's asked, what is the most important commandment? And this is his response. It's going to come up on the screen. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, our God, is one. The Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is this. Love your neighbour as yourself. There is no greater command than these. Now, I'm going to sum up that long passage really simply. That what Jesus is saying is the most important commandments, the most important things to do in the rules are to love God and to love others. And the point is not to focus on all sorts of rules. That is the point, to love God, to love others. The primary point of life is a deep, loving relationship with Jesus. The rest is meaningless without it. The primary point of our life should be that we love Jesus and we know his love. And the second part flows from that. It's a natural extension. As we are loved by God and we love him back, we then love those around us because he loves others as well. Now, I love football and I'm a Chelsea fan. Please don't hold that against me. Yeah, it was. I think for most people in church, it wasn't a good day for their football teams yesterday, so we'll gloss over that. I don't watch football sitting there hoping my team doesn't commit a foul. I'm not there going, oh, it's good, we didn't give away a throw-in, we didn't do this. That's not the point of watching football. Do you know what? I watch football hoping my team play well. They played well for some of yesterday's game. I want to see great goals. I want to see great play, great tackles, great saves. That's the bit I want to watch. I'm not so bothered about them following the rules super strictly. I'm not going to start crying if my team give away a foul. Now, if a team constantly break the rules and ignore it and constantly fouling, that's not going to help them win. They're going to get all sorts of trouble. Players get sent off. They give away penalties. That's not going to work in a game of football. But whether you follow the rules to the letter exactly is not what helps you decide who's going to win. They aren't the point of the game. They're there to give a structure to the game and let the game flow. And it's a bit like life. The point of life is love. Love God, and love others. The rules are important. They add structure. And they point us to where we go. They point us how to love each other and what that looks like. So Jesus takes these rules and he puts them in that context of loving God, loving others. I think we can all agree it isn't very loving to go around murdering someone. That's why God said it in the first place. However, if I said, do you know what? I love my wife so much, I've never murdered her. Exactly, you'd all laugh at me and you'd probably be a bit worried about my wife. Especially when she's not here today. Jesus takes the commandment, do not murder, and he shows its limitations. It's not enough just to say you love someone and not to murder them. Actually, if we really love people, we're not going to hold on to anger to them. We're not going to go around putting people down, insulting them. We're not going to speak badly of those people. We're called to so much more as people that follow Jesus. The life God wants us to lead is not just not murdering people, it's loving people. Ali preached last week about how we're called to be salt and light, which Jesus just said in this passage. We're called to go and shine to those around us. And Jesus goes quite far with this. He highlights that it's more important than worship. He says if you're in an act of worship, to pause and go to the person you're in conflict with. Be reconciled with them. This is how serious it is. He uses the example of the temple. You're in the temple about to give your offering and you remember it. Go and sort your thing out with that person and then come back. And actually, this is something I've been working through this week. I was in a worship time and someone came onto my heart that if I'm honest, I've not treated well. And they're a good friend of mine that I've just kind of lost touch with and kind of let things slip with. And I had to message them. And I had to say sorry and own up to the things that I'd done, the things that I'd kind of let them down. Because it's more important for me to be reconciled with that person than to stand and sing some songs. And I think that's the kind of principle that Jesus is saying. Now, it isn't always easy to be reconciled easily. That was just a quick message I could text to them, and we can then in a few days follow it up. But actually, it's about the spirit of it. It's not about following the rules. I don't want to see you dashing out if someone doesn't get on with you. But it's that important to live a life of love that where possible, we get on well with people. Then he talks about adultery. Fun topic I've ever heard. Adultery is so much more than just who you sleep with. You know, if I'm looking at people in a lustful way, how is that loving them? How is that loving my wife? How is that loving the people around me if I go around looking at people lustfully? And when we say lust, we don't mean thinking someone's beautiful. We can think someone's beautiful, they look nice, and actually that's a loving thing. When we love people, we think they're beautiful. And actually, we express that in the appropriate way. That could be really blessing to that person. Lust is separating the person from their physical appearance. It's looking at them for what we can get, and that's why it's not loving. And these standards Jesus sets out haven't been improved upon in the last 2,000 years. Jesus' solution is still as relevant now as it was then. And actually, when we look at the media, like week on week, there are people that fall down through this area. and through so many areas, people were looking at each other lustfully rather than looking at them with the eyes of love. There's a true story about a man named Ralston. He was a climber out in the canyons of Utah, and he suffered a bit of a rock fall, and he got his arm trapped up against the rock wall. And he's there in the middle of nowhere, in a canyon, looking up, stuck fast. And he came to the realization that his arm wasn't going anywhere, and no one was coming to find him. So he had to, and it's quite gruesome, chop off a bit of his arm. And he left it there in that canyon, and he escaped, and he's lived to tell the story, and he's written books about it, and he lives a full life minus part of his arm. And they made a movie about it, 127 hours. And actually, that's how Jesus equates sin to. He says in verse 30, it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It was better for that climber to lose a part of his hand and to be rescued and to go on to live his life than to stay in that canyon and die. Jesus is serious about the problem of sin in our lives. He says if a cycle of sin, if something leads you to sin rather, cut it off. It's more damage to be wrapped up in this cycle of sin in our lives than to lose a physical part of your body. That's how serious he says it. And you might think, oh, great, John, this is a bit extreme. Jesus has gone a bit far. But actually, you don't have to look far to see people whose lives have been destroyed by sin, whose lives have been destroyed by addiction and all sorts of things that have gone wrong in their life. People lose their families, they lose their jobs, they lose their reputations. Celebrities, film stars, politicians, sports people, church leaders, even friends. We can think about people that we know whose lives have just been destroyed. Their whole life has been lost because of that thing in their life. Now, rules set out a minimum requirements. We are called to so much more. God wants us to have a deep personal relationship with him. That has always been what God wants for us, to walk with him. In the beginning, it was walking with him in the Garden of Eden, and it's still the same today. He wants to walk with us. He doesn't want us just to meet the minimum standard of do not murder, do not sleep with someone who you're not married to. And that's why this attitude of doing the least doesn't work for Jesus. That's not what he wants for us. Imagine if I went to my wife and I said, what's the minimum amount of effort I can put into our relationship and you not divorce me? What's the minimum amount of work I have to do, money I have to spend on you, and I still stay married? I think she'd give me quite a swift answer. Or imagine if I went to my parents and said, do you know what, Mum and Dad, I'm quite busy. What's the least amount of time I can spend with you in the next 12 months? I think that would deeply hurt them. That's not the point of a relationship. And that's what these looking at the life through rules does. If all we're looking to do is meet the minimum rules, how loving? That's not loving God. That's not loving others. And I'm going to get you to do some work in a minute. I wonder if Jesus was here right now instead of me. I mean, he'd do a better job than me. He's Jesus. But if Jesus was here right now, what would he say to us? What higher standards of behaviour would he be expecting of us? I'm going to put 3 statements up on the screen. I'm going to get you in a minute just to get into little groups of about 4 or so. Have a think about these statements. These are the you've heard it said, but what would God say? So you've heard it said it's good to read a bit of the Bible each day. What would God say? If God was preaching on that now, what would he say if Jesus was here? You've heard it said it's good to come to church. But I tell you, what would Jesus say? You've heard it said that the staff team are trained to do the work of the church. But I tell you. So get into groups of 4 or about 4-ish where you are and have a think. And I'm going to hear some ideas. What would God say about these statements? Off you go. Okay. Let's hear some of your ideas then. Ali's going to run around with the mic to get some people's ideas. So, our first one. You've heard it said it's good to read a bit of the Bible every day. I'm not saying that's a wrong thing, but I'm saying if we say love God, love others, what will be the next? Who's going to feed back about that one? What do we think Jesus might say to that? Who's going to be brave? Let's have a hand up, then Ali can run to you. Adam at the back there. I would pick the person furthest away from Ali to start, wouldn't I? That's just harsh.
I've got a big mouth. What did I say now? I don't know. Read a chapter.
So read a chapter. It's not okay just to read a little bit?
Yeah.
Read a chapter. Okay? Anyone else anything to say? Oh, we've got some people over here. Oh, go on, Mark.
We agreed back here that we don't think it's a chore. It's not a rule. It's not a chore to read the Bible. If you enjoy something and you get good things from it, then it's not a rule. It's not a chore. It's not a problem. You have good days reading the Bible and you have not so good days. But it's a good thing. I agree. I think I'm going to embellish what you said. Actually, what you described, it's a relationship, isn't it? It's not a rule. It's not I have to do this because I have to do this. It's a relationship. As we read the Bible, as we spend time with Jesus, we're transformed. So it's more like when I spend time with someone I care about, it's not I have to do this to meet them in Mark. It's I want to spend time with them. I get life out of spending time with them. Down here, my group, someone was saying, do you know what? Read it until you know it, until it's deep down in your soul. Maybe that's what God would say to us today. The next one. You've said it's good to come to church. Well done. You've all come to church. You've all met that standard. Anyone else got any other ideas? Would Jesus say, come to church? Ooh, we've got one here. Ooh.
We said you don't actually have to come to a building for church. You can just be with a group of people. It could be at your home. It could be in the cafe, wherever, as long as you're there for the right reasons and the same reasons, basically.
Yeah. It's great coming to church, but you know what? We are the church. We're church whether we're here in this building or in a cafe or with our friends or at home on our own. We can do church. Two more quickly, go on then.
Okay. I believe it's really good to be kind and respectful. Okay, we may not like certain people, but it's good to have grace.
I agree. What's the point of coming to church if on the way we're not kind to the people we bump? If we're not kind to the person we see walking past?
You do have to go to church. You have to go to church to get other people to explain the bits you haven't understood when you have read the Bible. You do have to go to church. You miss the companionship of other people's speech of it, other people's thoughts of it. But you miss the closeness of God if you don't go to church. You miss everything out. You miss an awful lot. And I was ill last week. And I've been like a bear with a sore head all week. I miss it. And you get to that stage, you miss that interaction with God, with everybody who thinks like you do, who wants to know God. And then God will pour more of his Spirit into you. You do have to go to church.
I completely agree. Come to church and be changed. Come to church and become like Jesus. And then the last one. You've heard it said the staff team are trained to do the work of the church. What does God say? I mean, I'm one of the staff team, so clearly I'm wonderful and everything. Is that it though? Is that it? hands up. Who's got something else to say?
We're all leaders in our church, and all of us have a part to play.
Completely agree. So there's some of us who it's our job to do it, but actually you're all leaders. You're the church just as much as me.
Kieran just said that was what he was going to say, so...
Great minds think alike. Yeah, everyone in our church is made in the image of God. Everyone has gifts and talents. And actually, if we're going to be the church, if we're going to show people who Jesus is, it can't be just a few people that are employed. It has to be all of us using the gifts and talents that God has put inside us, in the places God has put inside us, God has put us in. Whether that's in church, whether that's in our homes, wherever we are, we should be shining Jesus. It's not enough just to leave it to some people. We're all called to love God, to love others, everywhere we are. And I believe our choices are important. Even if it's only us that see them. Our choices about whether we just maybe, sometimes read the Bible when you make bothers, or whether we make it a priority, whether we invest into that relationship. Whether we invest into relationships in the church, and we are the church, we're kind, we look out for others. Whether we use those gifts God's given us, or whether we leave it to someone else. Those are the choices that matter. Are we loving God and loving others? Are we choosing to walk in Jesus' love? Or are we looking to get by on the minimum? Now, I'm going to be honest, this is quite hard. So far, it seems like a lot of extra. It's like, I can handle not murdering people. I'm quite good at that. But let's be honest. I think we could all say there's times, probably even this week, when we've not always loved everyone we've spent time with. When we've fallen short of that barrier. And it can feel a bit impossibly hard that these standards are up here for Jesus. And this is where it is so important to look at this, not as a set of rules, but as something Jesus is saying. We put it in the context of Jesus, because as I said at the beginning, without that loving relationship with God, none of this really makes sense. Jesus asked a lot here, and it's in the context and the authority of who he is. He is someone who demonstrates sacrificial love again and again and again. Someone who passionately rejects anything that isn't walking in step with God. Walking with God, loving and loving others. And he loves you so much that he was willing to be tortured and die a horrible death, all just so he could have a relationship with you. That is the kind of love that Jesus shows. And so these are incredibly high standards. And they only make sense when we see how loved we are by God. And actually, until we feel God's love, how can we ever hope to live up to these standards? Until I know I'm loved by God, how can I hope to begin to love others? He wants to lead us into a life of love. He's seen us at our worst. He knows everything. He knows those rules we admit to breaking and those ones that we keep quiet, keep to ourselves. He's seen us at our worst, and he longs for a relationship with us, longs to know us, longs to call us closer, longs to spend time with us. And he leads us not into a life of rules, but a life of love. Love God and love others. And it's not because he likes rules or likes us to do the right thing. It's because he wants us to live life to the full. And a life of love, loving God, loving others, is a life to the full. What would we want for the people we care about? Do you know what? For my kids, I want them to know they are loved. And I want them to love others. To know they're loved and love others. Isn't that what we want? Or do we want them to walk around angry, lustful, hating? That's not what I want for my family. That's not what we want for the people we care about. And God's the same. He wants good things for us. He wants us to live full lives that are full of his love. I'm going to invite the band back up. And firstly, as we move into a time of worship, I really just feel we need to know God's love. Do you know what? When we come to church, that should be the first thing that we kind of feel. Every day, the first thing God wants to teach you is that he loves you, and he's for you, and he wants to spend time with you. And for some people, that might be a bit new, or that might be even a bit painful to be loved like that. And that's always where God wants to start. He wants everyone in this room to know they are loved by him on such a deep level. And then from that, there are some people that will have some next steps. There may be an area where God wants you to respond to his love. Maybe he wants to call you closer into relationship with him. And it's not about rules, about reading this much of the Bible every day or doing this each day. He's just calling you closer. Like a friend wanting to spend time with you, hang out with you. What would that look like in your life? For others, maybe it's a new level of holiness. Maybe it's that thing that is an area of your life where you're not very loving to people. And God says, I don't want that for you. I want you to live a life of love, a full life of love. And for others of you, maybe he's saying, do you know what? You are so amazing. I love you so much. And there's so many plans I've got for you, things you can go out and love others in your community, in your church, and wherever it is. There's ways he's inviting you to step into things and to use those gifts he's given you. So we're going to have a time of worship. And let's just respond. Let's just receive God's love.